So this panel is focused on the generative AI revolution or hype. As we all know, we have really talked about artificial intelligence for quite some time, and many of us have invested quite a bit of money into this space. So, I think right here we have quite a few, multi-billion-dollar companies here. So can we, get started with explaining who are you, what's company, and what brought you into the space of generative AI? Maybe we can get started with that.
I'm Anant, founder and CEO of Instabase. Before this, I was a PhD student at MIT. What Instabase does is it helps large enterprises automate their complex business operations. So for example, let's say if you are JP Chase or Goldman Sachs and you want to give a loan in less than 5 seconds, so you have to process a lot of information like person's pay stubs and bank statements and identity information and a bunch of other things. And can you do that all in real time in less than 5 seconds? So that would require AI, because as soon as human gets involved, it's not going to happen in less than 5 seconds. It will take several minutes or hours. So we take similar kind of processes and we help large enterprises automate all that. So we started with like some versions of AI before, and it kept evolving over the period. And of course, the large language models make things much, much easier. So we've been in AI since a pretty long period of time.
My name is Tim. I'm co-founder and CTO of Cresta. Prior to Cresta, I worked at OpenAI and was a PhD student at Stanford. What Cresta does is we enable basic contact center agents to be experts on day one. We've been deploying generative AI for large contact centers within Verizon and American Express, Fortune 500 companies since 2019. And then we use AI to help them become more effective and efficient.
Hi, I'm Asaf Yanai. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Alison AI. We're a creative or video analysis and insights technology. Basically, the mission or our mission is understanding videos and understanding what impacts or what makes a video becoming a good video, an engaging video, etc. We use it by running very deep analysis of short form videos online. Just out of curiosity, anybody knows how much or how many of the online videos are actually engaging or being utilized? So not a lot of people know, but it's really a fraction. And 90% of the online assets and online creatives online are actually videos. So our mission, again, is looking at videos in a different perspective, analyzing them, understanding what makes a good video, what makes a video perform better than others. And then we're going to the next level of reimagining or reinventing video creation by designing Gen AI smart prompts that I'll elaborate further later.
Josh?
Cool. Hey, all, my name is Josh. I'm the founder of Coframe. We are bringing intelligence to user interfaces like websites and applications, allowing them to adapt and improve themselves for their users. Prior to this, I've worked on a couple of companies. One is Autograph. Another one is Access Bell. This one used some early LLMs in 2019, 2020. We ended up selling it to Tata Group. And then before that, I was at Stanford doing undergrad and master's in computer science focused on AI.
All right, so we're gonna get started with a question for all the panelists here. All of you guys have seen the rise of Gen AI. We've seen companies we mentioned earlier. One of the news that came out yesterday, $4 billion from Amazon, right, into one of these competitors of yours, previous company. How do you guys think about, where do you see the real application? And given that you guys are all working on a specific area of AI, how do you see, what's propelling this adoption all of a sudden, or has it been all of a sudden? Maybe that's not the case, right? So many of you have been working on this space for over 10 years. What do you see the biggest evolution and what are the biggest drivers?
I'm happy to start. I think we already knew the problem was real, right? Goldman always did loan, or JP Morgan always did, client onboarding, and insurance companies always did claim processing. So these problems had existed in the past. It's just that over the period, I think AI has evolved in a way that allows you to do it much more efficiently. So there is a real economic case that has to be made. So if you look at the history, when we started, you could not process much of those things. So we literally started with building workflows where you write like code for every single type. Very, very painful. You could still get some gain, but very, very painful. Then transformer paper came 2017. You could sort of like take one of these like base models and fine tune on specific document type. Much, much better, but still it required customers to collect like thousands of samples, fine tune for each of those use cases. And once they did that, huge value. LLM basically changes this game exponentially from the perspective of the economic gain. Now you really don't have to, fine tune things. Most code cases like Eurosort works out of the box. And that basically means that they can start getting value from day one. Accuracy is good enough. In certain cases, when you need fine tuning, you can always go that route. So these problems that existed, I think what AI is actually doing is it's making it very clear the economic case, especially for large enterprises. And we have seen the adoption getting very expedited over the last 12 to 18 months. It's because let's say automating a particular business unit earlier would take a year. Now you can do that in a month. And that's a huge, huge, huge gain. And I think we'll continue to see, especially all of the advancement that is happening in the large language models and AI sort of space will have significant impact on how it is going to shape every single industry and every single process in the workflows.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that point of time to value. That's how enterprise buy software. They see value and they can purchase quickly. I remember back in 2019, we were deploying basic GPT-2 based models, and ChatGPT is based on GPT-3, right? But back then, for us to implement software for a company, we have to first ingest data. We have to train the model on the large data sets. So that cycle sometimes also involves labeling, right? Humans look at data and creating like manual labels for that data, and that could take months for the model to go live and for the customer to see value. But with LLMs, now you can basically automatically generate labels, or you can use prompt engineering to show the model is working on day one. That way you can demonstrate the value of the software and then getting to the enterprise much more quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I think efficiency, automation, and scale, these are the main drivers of adoption for Gen AI and AI in general. But again, my personal perspective is that LLMs is just the beginning. It's a single dimension model, so to speak. And I think that the visual models would become a lot more complex and a lot more challenging to overcome. But these, I believe, we at Alison, we believe that these would be the actual breakthrough of Gen AI, not just creating a conversation or a chat or a text, but generating live video that is based on billions of different data points. So I think when you look at adoption and you look at the scale from LLMs to the visual models that will be able to come in the future, and we're already seeing the beginnings of it, I think this would accelerate the adoption even further and accelerate the production and development of the models even further.
I think there are two important metrics or measurements to track when you're looking at this type of stuff for adoption. One is how impressed are you with the model and what it's able to do when you're sort of like supervising it? And the second is how much do you trust it when it's kind of doing its own thing on autopilot? Anecdotally, I think that when you look at the progression of the generative models, a lot of people say with GPT-2, and I found this myself, like you'd sort of like stop being impressed with it after about like 30 seconds of using it. You'd have that initial moment of, oh, this is really cool. And then the honeymoon period would wear off and you'd kind of start to explore some of its limitations. With GPT-3, it took a few minutes. And again, this is just anecdotally, this is different for everyone and different depending on the use case. With GPT 3.5, many people are still impressed today. And it's the same thing with GPT-4. So we're getting this kind of like exponential on the sort of like how impressive and interesting is this curve, which is the first metric. The second metric is trust. How much do you trust it? People pretty much wouldn't trust GPT-2 to do anything. Very few people trusted GPT-3 to do anything unsupervised. And a lot of people are starting to trust GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 to perform tasks in an automated fashion, but only in certain use cases. So that is the next trend, the next curve to look at. And so just by like asking people within different processes and business and use cases where they are on that like impressiveness curve and also B on the like trust curve, you can get a pretty good sense about where things are headed and how quickly things are going to arrive.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask a question that a lot of people have been asking, right? So we poured really tens of billions of dollars in the space, and a lot of people are gonna, win, but at the same time, they say it's gonna be a graveyard of AI companies. How do you guys think about, why is that so much interest at the same time everyone believes it's not gonna, everyone's gonna win? So how do you think, is really going to evolve reality-wise in the next 5-10 years?
So I think, at the end, some questions are driven by greed of the VCs, so they keep putting more money. So that's hard to explain. So that's something I would not comment on. The second, I think, is I personally believe is advancement in artificial intelligence gives you, for the first time, a different kind of programming model and different kind of paradigm. Like until now, computer required very deterministic set of instructions that you give and it perform in a very deterministic set of way. And that basically required only developers could write code because you have to understand that language. You have to understand how to program and all that. For the first time, you can interact with computers in a way humans can understand. A lot more people can actually ask it to do certain things, ask computers to create things, ask computers to think in certain way, and all of those kind of stuff. And when you have this kind of big paradigm shift, there is going to be a lot of unexpected successes that will emerge. And it's very, very hard to know like what new possibilities that will emerge from this new paradigm, from this new way of programming, from this new way of computing. And that basically means there is every layer that would be disrupted, every layer which could be redefined in a way that we might not imagine. And that's why there exists a huge economic potential. And it's very hard to predict who will win, because if we knew, right, you could just put money there. But I think in the longer run, there is going to be a lot of success stories that will come, which basically means there is going to be outsized return on many of the investment, and there is going to be many that will fail, which is true for when internet came. This is true when phones came. This is true when crypto came. I don't know in crypto if there is winners or not, but but still. But the whole idea, I think, is the AI is definitely going to push towards a world where every technology stack will be redefined, and where there would be new ways of solving problems that could lead to completely sort of unexpected kind of companies emerging that would have very outsized potential returns. So I'm very bullish on AI. So even though there would be many failures, I think there would be some sort of like generation defining successes.
Yeah, I think when we first started, we were looking at the software market, right? So if you think about SaaS, like, companies pay, maybe $1,000 per seat for the software. But if you look at the salary that you pay the humans, right? The human layer is actually much, much bigger than the software layer. Like you pay like contact center agents like $60,000 to $80,000 a year. That's like 10 or 60 times like more than the software revenue. And what we're seeing with generative AI is that a lot of that human layer is going to be replaced by software, and that unlocks a huge amount of value, and that's going to be much larger than SaaS, and we're going to see that basically anything that you think of what humans do, right, in a lot of jobs is just like basically you're assimilating information from text and you're spitting out text from your mouth. And then I think LLM is already doing much better in a lot of these functions. I won't speak for like the expert domains like laws or medicine, but for generic things that it can beat human in many aspects. So I mean, there are areas that human are going to do better, and there are areas that LLM is going to do better. I think that kind of synergy is going to we'll see it play out in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that the market's going to consolidate quite a lot, and we're going to see a lot of startups either slowly fading and dying, like you mentioned, and creating a graveyard of AI or Gen AI startups. But I also think that there's a lot of opportunities, and it's mainly around the earlier traction, it's mainly around the business model, and it's mainly around the relevancy of the software or the solution to the businesses. If you create an application layer that adds a lot of value and creates tremendous efficiency, introduces scale, and also allows you to make a lot of money, even with an early stage product, I think that would be a very good sign of a good company that is able to scale and grow quickly. Having said all of this, I think that, again, looking at what are the outputs or the outcomes of our solutions or our technologies, and how companies would really adopt them and trust them, like you said, or will be able to remove the hallucination layer that exists, and basically use technologies and solutions around the Gen AI to not just solve a problem, not just do things quicker and more efficiently, but come up with content or come up with outcomes that will be winners for your business, will be differentiators. And I think that companies, all of our companies like us, needs to keep that in mind when we develop our own business models, when we develop our own technologies and solutions, how we interact and how we create those synergies between our markets, right? It's useless creating a nice technology or a very powerful technology that nobody knows how to use or nobody trusts. So I think that the differentiator moving forward would be early traction, would be business model, and would be relevancy of the outputs and the outcomes to a large variety of different businesses.
Josh?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think another one that's important for these businesses is the ability to adapt to different advances in foundation model layer. That's a lot of what I think is holding a lot of the interesting use cases back today. We're still not quite there yet, right? In terms of people trusting, as we were just talking about, trusting the model to do its thing autonomously in the workplace. But we're getting there, and there's like this curve that's happening. And as capabilities increase, we'll start to see more parts of business be able to be executed by these models. I think like marketing and sales is probably going to be the first to get fully adopted. It's already happening, really. I mean, some of the biggest early companies and early quote unquote wins, we'll see if they are long term, were in this category. I'm seeing a lot of the like early signs of legal starting to become prevalent with AI. Some of the more interesting companies around like, LLMs for legal are just now getting founded. Same thing with like accounting and finance, and the personal assistant companies are just really kind of starting to get some initial traction in terms of product they're putting out. So it's really all just happening right now. I think like right in terms of the fundamentals, like there's no question that the space is wildly overvalued in the short term. But I think I strongly feel that it's undervalued in the long term. There's going to be an immense adoption here. We're still in the very early part of that adoption curve. Like we're in the like early adopter category, because we've sort of like jumped the gun a little bit. The capabilities aren't truly there yet for people to be able to trust them fully, but they'll get there quickly.
All right. So next, I'm going to ask a very controversial question. As many of you guys can see, AI is becoming a very competitive method. And for some governments, it's becoming, somewhat of a weapon, let's put it that way. I believe that all of us here, many of you guys have gone to school, Stanford, MIT. Many of you also have grown up a different country, came to this country, right? Coming from the Middle East, Israel, right? I would love to understand what's your take on the current status of AI competition amongst different countries, right? A lot of the money obviously have been flowing this way, Silicon Valley, right? But many of you are, products cultural of multiple different countries, nationalities. So how do you see this AI competition? Is it really becoming sort of a war between nations in a soft power sort of way? Or how do you guys see, this moving forward?
A complicated question. I think I think every paradigm shift basically opens up some of these risks. Like internet is one of them, right? That allow you to cyber attack because all the information gets digital. Like what internet really did was, right, it made the marginal cost of distribution close to zero. And if you look at AI, it's almost making marginal cost of creating new things much smaller than it used to be before. It depends on like where AI is going to move. I think there are two sides that you're seeing right now. One is there's going to be some big companies controlling these powerful models, and that's where the world will move. Or it's going to move more towards the internet, like open, where that becomes the sort of foundational technology where everyone would have access to. In general, I'm supportive of the world where it's more open, and I think the humanity can benefit from it, and basically we can actually explore a lot of cool stuff that otherwise earlier we would not be. Because once government starts competing this way, that basically means we are creating a bunch of these closed models and competing on those kind of stuff. My guess, if today I have to take a bet, is that the way internet had set a really good precedent, that we will likely, and I think there are enough people who are working on it, we are going to move more towards open model of AI, and that would basically lead to more productive usage. I'm sure this will also be used for like, how do you understand, like for example, classified information in another language. You don't need to hire translators, all that kind of stuff. So that would be like the way internet is used. So there is going to be some use of it for intelligence and wars and other kind of stuff. But generally, I think there is going to be a lot more and valuable civilian use.
Yeah, I think this wave of AI is more like a brute force AI, right? Because we take a simple architecture like transformer, and then we scale it with lots of computed data. And this is something that can be replicated once you have lots of resources. If you have lots of GPUs and you have your access to data, then I think that someone can create a super intelligence. And the issue right now is that the companies that we, OpenAI and Anthropic, we throw billions of dollars in it, but government defense budget is like 10 times or 100 times bigger, and that's going to be a problem. And so if one government doesn't play nice and in a way that then pouring that amount of money is going to create a frontier model that's going to be much better than everybody else, and that's a huge advantage. So I do think there's a risk there. I don't have a solution here, so I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different answer to this, without getting too much into politics and geopolitical situations. But I think that a lot of the nations and superpowers, like we call it, they were rushing into the production models. And I think that now production models are not the main challenge anymore. I think that the main challenge is how do we leverage, how do we use, how do we infuse data or insights towards those production models to actually get the outputs or the outcomes that we want. Again, going back to the relevancy point I mentioned earlier. And I'm coming from the Israeli intelligence forces in the military. Sorry for this. But our main...
We need to hear, from the south of the world. So, hey.
Yeah, so our, the main use cases for AI and Gen AI is either attack, defend, or surveillance. And again, I think that how do we leverage and how do we use those models to get what we really need? And I think this step, we need to take a step backwards. We need to think about how we, infuse or leverage those models with data, with insights, with structured and layered data that will be able to use those models for the benefits of, let's say, the superpowers or the different nations around the world. And I can say that for us in the Middle East and for us in Israel, this is exactly what we're doing. We're not really focusing on the production models anymore, because I think, again, this market will consolidate in the end, and one or two superpowers will control this area. But the question is, how do we use those models and how do we leverage this? And this is what we're experimenting, and this is what we're investing in the Middle East and in Israel. And this is exactly what we're doing at Alison, finding the right ways to leverage data, to leverage those insights, to layer those in order to create or output something that would be relevant, accurate, and tangible and impactful for businesses and for countries or nations.
I can definitely see a world in which these large models start to assume different roles of government, in fact, and perhaps the role of government at large eventually, because ultimately they have a lot more data to think about in their head at once than humans do. But that's another point. I think what it comes to, I agree with Tim overall in this. It really comes down to the compute that you have and the data that you have. Compute is a relatively straightforward thing for large superpowers to consolidate. Like Tim mentioned, they have massive budgets, and chips are becoming a politicized issue as well. I mean, U.S. has the CHIPS Act. And so that's one part of it. The other part of it is data. We haven't really seen any movements here from governments, to my knowledge, of mandating data to be shared with government to be trained on or things like that. But once models become, these types of models become a very important key part of national security strategy, I could definitely see a mandate for collecting data and being able to use that in national interest. It's a strategy that the U.S. and the U.S. needs to think deeply about. Right now, it's being driven by the private sector, and it's looking like, right, at least at the current moment, it's looking like the private sector is the one driving all of the innovation, and sort of it's available to everyone. It's in a good place right now. In fact, there's a lot of really encouraging work in open source models as well, at least for the time being. But I could easily see this becoming an issue of national security.
So on that topic, right, we are obviously living in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, this place where we have generally a more positive view on AI, right? I would say, generally true. How do you guys think about the overall, population? Because we've heard the media mentioning the evils about AI. Well, you guys are obviously the leaders in this industry, helping us get to the next phase, and hopefully it's good for humanity, right? So coming back to the technical side of things, what do you think are the technical advancements that's actually going to be good for humanity? How do you guys make sure we are achieving responsible AI?
I mean, I think we talked about a number of things that AI allows you to get you productivity, both from the perspective of individual productivity as well as operational productivity. So there is definitely a good side of it. It makes every single person a lot more productive, as you have seen with a lot of co-pilots. And then operational productivity, we talked about how we can significantly automate many of those things. There's definitely a real positive value of it. I do have sympathy for those people who think AI can sort of kill humanity, and which is the point. What if the internet made the marginal cost of distribution zero? Would AI going to make marginal cost of creation zero? Because that's what humanity has done, creating new things, because that's what drives us. And if AI can do a better job at that, doing better research than us, doing better poetry and art and everything than us, then the purpose of human civilization, like what that means. I still think that we haven't tested the limit of human potential. So maybe that will push us towards doing more interesting things and more useful things. It's just so early to say. I do have some sympathy when you think about those things, but currently I think that the good side of AI outweighs any of those bigger risks, but something to still pay attention to and observe as we go into next decades or so. It's definitely not happening next year.
Yeah, I think when I agree with the early stage of internet, we saw that small websites can become more popular than the major media companies, and I think AI in the world of AI is sort of a leverage, right? It can enable individuals to have productivity and effectiveness compared to maybe organizations, and I think that the problem we need to make sure is just alignment, right? I think that if you can give ChatGPT a prompt and make sure it outputs the stuff you want, and if you extrapolate that, in a few years, if we have say human and robots, can you have a give it intent or goal, and it sort of execute a plan that aligns what you want. So if we can solve that well, then I think that AI can give individuals a lot of leverage.
Yeah, I actually think that AI becomes less responsible, let's put it this way, when you're not just looking at your own data, when you're not just looking at relevant data, and then the AI just makes up stuff, right? We've all seen it in ChatGPT that we've tried to prompt in something and we got a completely different answer every single time, or a slightly different answer. And this is where it becomes less responsible, at least in my opinion. And I think that not just restricting the data sets, restricting the layering of the data, and basically designing a better prompt engineering and designing better inputs to those models will help us become more responsible, help us become less of an hallucination models that just makes up stuff or adds stuff or random facts from publicly available data or those kind of things. And I think that if we're looking at responsible AI, both on the commercial side, but also on the technical side, it really becomes, or it funnels down to how you restrict the models and what basis of data and insights we actually provide them to produce responsible outputs. And I think we're not that far, to be honest, in that. And I think that within the next few years, there's going to be a lot of investment in this side and in those technologies. And I think it's literally around the corner, but it's also up to us to become more responsible and to become more controlling over the models, to make sure that we're not overutilizing them just to create scale, to create efficiency. And I think it all circles back to all the topics and all the issues we've just talked about.
Sorry, we're running out of time here. I know it's obviously we want to go on for a while here, but a couple fire round questions. First of all, there are so many companies developing their own LLM, right? You have almost every ecosystem, Facebook, how do you guys think about, is it really needed for everyone to develop their own LLM? Like, what's your take on, how we're doing this?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I was just talking to a VP at Tata Group about this yesterday. They're a big conglomerate in India. They're thinking about developing their own LLMs. My recommendation for people like this is that, like, unless you have a specific enough type of data that you're trying to do an actual training run on, where it makes sense, that domain of data, that's not going to be served by something that is already open source, i.e. anything language related is going to be fine for your use case. It doesn't really make sense to train your own, I believe. Nation states definitely make sense. And then the largest companies in the private sector definitely make sense. But for anyone other than that, I don't know if it really makes sense to do train your own foundation model from the ground up. Unless you have a specific data domain, maybe you're trying to look at computational chemistry, and you're trying to basically determine the binding affinities for molecules based on SMILE strings. And so that could make sense, but otherwise it really just stick with fine tuning.
Any other?
I agree. I think it did not make a lot of economic sense for every company to train their own LLM. Generally, I think there would be 3 or 4 big LLM players. And I think you still want that competition, 3 or 4, so that you can pick the right one and they keep sort of innovating. But generally, it doesn't make sense for everyone doesn't make a lot of economic sense for everybody to create their own LLM. Just fine tuning or prompting or few sort learnings would just work fine. In some cases, it might make a strategic sense, like government.
You guys are building one yourself, right? Sorry.
So yes. So in the region why is because we serve a lot on business documents, and there has not been a lot of LLM that have been trained on large amounts of business documents, given that we have access from all the large enterprises. So yes, we are building our own LLM. It's not a public information yet.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the base model will become a commodity. I think we saw Llama 2 is getting much, much closer to GPT-4. And if you think about these public LLMs, they're basically trained on basically public internet data, maybe public books, a lot of public data. And given this same size of model, given the same amount of data, that I think all the LLM will converge to the optimal LLM that will become the base and commodity for all the companies. And then you can basically use that to fine tune on your domain data. And I think that will be a paradigm that a lot of companies will adopt, is instead of training your own base LLM, which costs like $100 million, you can just tune your LLM based on the base model with like tens of thousands of dollars.
So that's a very relevant question, right? Actually, I've always wanted to ask you guys this. We all know, right, today training these data is extremely expensive. We're talking about tens of millions a day. That's why so much funding has been going to this space, right? We've seen really like multi-100 billion type of valuations from not too long, right? So how do you guys think about the cost of things? Like, is the cost going to go down? Like, what are the new advancements that can help us achieving relatively more affordable AI?
Are those really funding or GPU credits?
Whichever way you want to take it.
So I think a lot of those $100 million funding is really GPU credits, right? The strategic people are giving you so that you can consume their GPUs. So I think thinking of those as institutional VC funding could be a little misleading. I think early on, like, nobody knows what the optimal limits are, and that's why people are trying to make their bets. But eventually, I think I agree with Tim. It will going to converge towards like 2 or 3 top models, and they will keep competing, and they all will have similar performances. Like if you look at cloud, right? There are like 3 big cloud providers that control the market. Chips, right? Intel, AMD, and a few others. Same thing is going to happen, because at the end, like, it will become such a basic thing that everybody will either fine tune them or build on top of them. And anything more than 3 or 4 is going to be too much to support, right? Nobody wants to basically go and support like 1,000 different underlying architectures. So generally, I think most people will converge towards fine tuning or few sort learning.
Yeah. First, I think it doesn't make sense to create your own LLM and train it, mainly because of cost, but also because, as we said earlier, unless you have a domain or a vertical expertise or a specific market, and then it makes total sense. And also it makes a cost sense and a commercial sense to do so, because you have a business model to support it. But I think that costs will go down for sure. And it's just a matter of probably a year or 2 until we'll start seeing the beginnings of it. And then it would be probably an arms race. Who gets there first? When it's so cheap and when it's so affordable, then it's going to be a matter of execution, how fast we can go, how fast we can grow, and how strong or solid the business model is, and if it makes commercial sense. So that's my take, at least on this. But I do think that the training set and the costs that are involved are also going to take some companies away from developing their own models and looking at the application layer instead of the models themselves.
Same. Yeah, it's a relatively straightforward calculation. You just have to look at how much doing this costs, and then like what's the incremental value of you doing it. Many times that's going to be negative because these are models trained by the best in the industry, players who know a lot about the space, and just fine tuning makes the most sense.
All right. So before we end this panel, do we have any questions from the audience? We want to give everyone a chance to ask. Please go ahead.
So yeah, there is a technique that a lot of people use. It's called retrieval augmented learning, called RAG, where models are not training itself or updating its information based on data that's saying about you, but it's only like looking at your data to answer your question and then will forget everything. It's not using that for training, or it's not retaining any of those information. And I think there is a setting in most of these now, like OpenAI, ChatGPT, which is like, hey, don't retain my data or don't learn from my data, and look at this information, and based on that, have conversation with me or answer me my questions. So yeah, I think that kind of world is going to become more and more popular because not everybody will be comfortable their data being used for either training the model or being retained in the model. You can trust these organizations. I mean, legally there would be there are going to be legal consequences if they say something else and do something else. Generally, I think we can trust the rule of law.
I'd also add that if you really wanted to, you could have your own instance on premises of one of these open source models and fine tune on that, and that's effective as well. You could do RAG as well on that if you wanted to.
Yeah, and we also see some frontier model companies like Anthropic. They're providing models on premise, so through a cloud provider like Amazon.
We also do that. So if you want to run model completely in-house, so we provide in-house models for a bunch of large enterprises like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of America, and so on. Some sales.
Yeah, Instabase. Reach out to Instabase first.
I also agree, and I think that the multiple ways of restricting the models and making sure that your data stays safe. And what we do at Alison AI, and the reason a lot of big brands and companies are trusting our AI and our Gen AI, it's exactly this. We're able to control the data in a controlled environment and only use their own data and data that is relevant for them, and they label this data specifically as something that they would like to use for creation or for generation of new content or new videos, etc. So it is possible. You just need to cherry pick or hand pick the right partners to do so.
Any other questions? Oh wow, so many questions. I can only pick one. How do I find this out? All right, the guy with the pink brace. I mean, you have to pick. I have to pick you. Yeah, exactly.
We talked a little bit about the spectrum of AI value versus human value, going from replacement to augmentation to multiplying. I was wondering if you feel that you even have an ability or even a responsibility to steer the sector of technology towards somewhere along that spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah, I think basically it's about the tool chains that you create, which will lead, at the end, the good software tools and good software systems lead the user in the right direction. And I think that, like Microsoft, for example, they have taken a stand that everything that they're going to build is going to go more towards Copilot because they believe that AI is not yet ready to fully replace, but can significantly multiply each person's productivity. In operational productivity, that might not make sense. You may want to automate fully. So I think each tool will make their own, sort of call on what is the right thing to do. And then based on the success, the market, feedback, they will adjust and eventually it will steer into some direction. We don't know which direction yet, but so far what it looks like is it's augmenting humans' potential in a significant way, the direction where we are heading.
Yeah, the key word there is alignment. This is something you'll probably hear a lot. Alignment's super important, but it's the most important to be looking at if you're like a foundation model company like OpenAI or Anthropic or one of these that are doing a foundation model.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. That was a really great discussion. I appreciate it. We're gonna now open for our lunch. So lunch is served over there. Please feel free to grab a plate. We will resume in an hour. Thank you.